Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 4 of season 4, and it's a very special episode because not only was today the day that Maxon announced S26 with a whole bunch of really fun features, but we have a guest today. As usual, when we have a new version of cinema, we've got Rick Barrett here to help talk us through all the new features. How's it going, Rick?
Hey, everybody. Hey, Chris. Good to be here.
Yes, always great to have you here. In the chat, how's the audio sounding? Are me and Rick kind of synced up pretty well there? We just put all of this together. The way the software is working, it seems like Skype was different, but I think we got it working. Let's see. Demi, yeah, you can ask questions from YouTube. I will be keeping an eye on both YouTube and on Twitch. As always, if you have a typed out question, it can be in either. If you want to post a link of some sort, you would be doing it in the Twitch. But in this one, we're going to be pretty much just tackling S26 features, so I don't think there'll be too many links popping through. So yeah, everybody sound off. Where is everybody coming from? Where in the world are you? What time is it where you are? And start getting your S26 questions together. I mean, me and Rick have things that we can jump in and just demo, but if anybody has any specific questions, it's always better to be tackling the things that people specifically are asking about. While everyone is doing that, Rick, how do you feel about this new version?
It's an exciting day for the entire Maxon family. I mean, this is a great product launch across all of the Maxon One products. Cinema 4D S26, of course. Redshift 3.5 is super exciting with standard surface, and with XPU, we're excited. We'll be talking about that, I'm sure, today as well. And then we've got great updates on the Red Giant products. We've got the trap code actually has layer maps from Form now, and it has M1 support. The new lens flares is awesome. Magic Bullet with open color IO and diffusion and halation. And then, of course, Forger with the introduction of C4D primitives, and then the big news, ZReMesher, of course, now part of Maxon One with no change in the price.
Which is super crazy. If you have the Maxon subscription, then you now have, the Maxon One subscription. You've got ZReMesher. But you also snuck in one of the best tools from ZReMesher directly into Cinema 4D. And I think it's both a really big deal on the face of it, and I think it's going to be one of those tools that is just naturally in your workflow. Like almost every demo I did, I found myself reaching for the ZReMesher just to make the mesh look nicer.
Absolutely, and it's so nice to have ZReMesher like completely procedural right there in Cinema 4D, and it works great, especially with I'm loving using it with the volume modeling workflow, because you can create everything you can imagine really with that volume modeling workflow, but it would create these super dense meshes, and now we can just super easily retopologize those into just beautiful quad meshes.
Yeah, and the way it follows the curvature of everything. I mean, this has probably been a tool in ZReMesher forever, but I haven't used too much at ZReMesher, so it's like, oh, look at this new magical tool. This is wonderful. Let's see. Checking out the chat, we've got Sweden, we've got San Francisco, we've got some Detroit, Italy, Portugal, Russia, Portland, Oregon, Dubai, Australia. How's it going, everybody? Somebody else from Chicago. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in and hanging out. Feel free to post questions, and I think we got a couple coming in already. Somebody saying, the chat's going pretty quick. As a Maxon One subscriber, is there anything I need to know about the GPU versus CPU rendering? What would you say?
So as a Maxon One subscriber, you have access to both GPU and CPU rendering. All our Cinema 4D subscribers have access to Redshift CPU now. That's great because it means that we can start to standardize Cinema 4D on Redshift. We can integrate it in a way that we can only integrate it if every subscriber has access. So every subscriber is going to have access to Redshift CPU. Redshift subscribers and Maxon One subscribers will also have access to Redshift GPU. Now, also, every Cinema 4D subscriber is going to have access to 5 team render clients of Redshift CPU. So that means that even if you're using Redshift GPU on your main machine, or even if you just have Redshift CPU on your main machine, you can make use of additional machines using Redshift CPU via team render.
And technically, even if you're just on one machine, you can render with both the CPU and the GPU, but you probably want to be careful with that, because if you got really fast GPUs and your CPU is relatively slower, if you got like a whole bunch of different frames to render, that might work out pretty well. But maybe if you've got one giant image and your CPU is way slower, that might capture the last bucket and hold on to it for a while. So in the wrong circumstance, it could actually take a little bit longer, right?
Yeah, and that's actually why we turned it off by default. So within the Redshift settings, you'll see the devices for your CPU and then any compatible GPUs, and they're all checked by default. But it's going to use the licensing to determine which devices it used to render. Unless you check that hybrid rendering option. If you check the hybrid rendering option, it will use the GPU and the CPU together, and it'll just mix the pixels. But you definitely, in most cases, want to leave that off for now because we're still working on CPU performance, and as we continue to iterate on it, if you have any kind of compatible GPU, you're generally going to be better off just having GPUs only rendering.
Yes. Somebody over on YouTube is asking about the speed comparisons of CPU versus GPU versus what physical would have been. And I don't know if you have any numbers, but I'm going to track down this post I saw EJ did on Twitter because he did a quick speed test, and I think it's a good kind of benchmark for what they're going to be looking like.
Yeah, we're certainly benchmarking, and it's something that is very dependent on the scene, the types of Redshift features that are being used in the scene. Physical was very good at some lesser, not so photorealistic types of rendering, whereas Redshift excels at the photorealistic stuff. As we continue to work on the performance, we're going to work on making CPU as fast as possible, but it's early days and there's lots of room to continue improving it.
Sure. I found EJ's tweet. I'm going to switch over to my desktop with guest, and pull this over. And you can see here, EJ said he did a quick comparison where he rendered it out on GPU and it took 30 seconds. On the CPU, it took 6 minutes and 55 seconds. But then as a comparison, he said in physical renderer with all the equivalent type settings, it took over 30 minutes. So yeah, if you're still working from physical, then this is going to be a huge improvement. And it does, as you said, make it so that everybody can be working from... Maxon can talk about Redshift in a kind of a unified way because everybody has access to it now.
Yep, totally.
Let's see, scrolling through. Scrolling through within the panels upgrade. I'm not sure I'm following what that means. Oh, I understand. You have to highlight an attribute. You have to highlight one of the attributes to scroll it. So I'll pull my desk back up again to show that. Yeah, this is a huge thing, and I pointed out in the video. Let me grab something with a bunch of parameters. So like a cloner set to object mode probably. And now we can put a cube in there. Or actually, I think even a spline is going to be even more. So that gives us all these settings. You see I've got a big, tall. I'll even scroll this down. So in the past, if you were scrolling through these properties, if you were moused over one of these settings, then you'd start changing that number. And you'd be like, oh, no, I just changed like 4 different numbers and different modes and whatnot. But now you can't scroll anywhere I scroll. Even if I'm moused over one of these numbers, I can still properly scroll the attributes up and down. If I highlight it, then now I can scroll that parameter. So that's going to just be one of those, it's one of those things that you would trip over a couple times a day and not think about it. And that should now be working way better.
Yeah.
It's the little things.
We had a lot of users come to us and basically say that they would accidentally hit a setting and scroll it all the way to the top and end up, with their scene freezing because it was, waiting to process, 5 million segments or something.
Oh, totally. Yeah, like in the volume builder, you actually accidentally scroll down the voxels and suddenly you're at like 0.1. It's like, oh no. So yeah, there's a really nice collection actually of a whole bunch of little interface changes. Actually, would you like to maybe pop your screen open and just talk about some of the tweaks to the interface? Things
Sure.
like the check marks coming back and whatnot. So switching over, and we've got Rick's screen up.
Yeah, everybody's super excited that we made the checkmark screen again, and that's just proof that we listen to our users. Because we got a lot of feedback that people did not like gray check marks. They like green ones. And so we brought those back. We also added a whole bunch of additional icons in because we did get some feedback that there were, missing icons in 25 as we made this transition in our user interface. We've tried to keep things fairly stable with 26, and we will, with 25 was the big change. We're going to keep them stable moving forward, but we've continued to make a few tweaks as we move towards stability. And one of them is sort of these separators within the menus, which I think is really nice. It just sort of helps you with some place marking and finding the right place in each of the menus. We've also made it so that the interface dynamically changes based on what the current renderer is.
Yes,
so
I love that.
Right now in standard, you can see I'm getting the standard scene objects and the standard lights. And if I switch here to Redshift, you'll see that we get the Redshift scene objects and lights. So this is, again, one step towards deeper integration that we can continue to pursue now with Redshift as included, in Cinema 4D.
And then also the materials go along with that too.
Right. So when you create a new default material, it's going to default to creating a Redshift material now. We have moved a few of the commands. You still got the Redshift stuff here, but you're going to see the Redshift material there. And then we've moved some of the Redshift tools down here in the material menu as well. So if you're looking for those, they're down here now. But that's the bulk of the interface changes. But I guess while we're here, I can mention one of my favorite new features, which is the filtered font chooser. So you can click in here now to make it editable, and you can to activate the font chooser and just start typing, and it'll filter that down so you can really quickly find the font that you want. Because I'm not even a designer, and look how long my font list is. And yes. I know that you designers, yours scrolls much longer even than that. So I think that's a super cool update. Also, something that I think hasn't gotten a ton of attention yet in some of the early reviews is the variable font support that we've added within the text capsule.
I didn't mention it because I didn't think that feature had made it through, so I just jumped over it. So actually, I'm not even sure about what this does. So this is new to me.
Yeah, so this is only in the capsule. It doesn't work in the text spline or the text object. Mostly because getting this feature to work in combination with the dynamic kerning that we have in the classic text object is a little tricky. But if I go ahead and add a text scene nodes capsule in here, and I'm going to just align it middle, we'll switch this to use variable font, and we can drag in specific variable fonts into the field here. So this is just a file selector. So I'm going to grab a couple. We'll grab this one here, Amstel var, that I downloaded online. You'll want to check this merge segments, which does sort of a union on it. It's just sort of the way the font engine works. Mm-hmm. But variable fonts are super cool because you get all of these parameters, and you can kind of infinitely change the fonts, which I'm sure drives some font designers crazy, but I mean, they actually design the fonts this way and distribute them, so I guess that it's allowed. I don't know. Yeah. I was always told don't mess with the fonts, but you get all of these settings to really change up how the font works. And I'll just open a couple of different ones here to show some of the different things that you can achieve. The Science Gothic. Sometimes they have standard styles built in, and you can just choose from the drop down, and these are basically presets on these settings down here. But then again, you can dynamically adjust all of the settings,
Awesome.
So that's really cool. There's even like some really crazy ones. Like I found this one, Corona Face Impact, and we'll just kind of switch this to an A here. But basically this has like before Corona and after weeks of wearing face masks, months without haircuts, homeschooling, long hair and face mask years. And again, you can go down here and like add in like the face mask years and the hair length. So font designers do some really fun stuff with the variable fonts, and now you can start playing with those as well in the spline capsule.
I had no idea. That's really cool. I didn't even know variable fonts was a thing. I'm not in the world of design too much, so I've always thought that like, why can't you do more stuff with fonts? It seemed like an obvious thing, but nice to see that is a real thing in the world now.
There you go. That's a pretty perfect font for you there. It's kind of looks Lasso like.
Yeah, look at that. Somebody's asking what Mac you are on.
I am on the MacBook Pro with the M1 Max chip. I've been a Windows person my entire life, but with all of the great stuff that Mac is doing with the Apple Silicon chips, I've made the jump on my laptop anyway, and I love this machine. It's super portable. The battery life is amazing, and it performs great with Cinema 4D. And Maxon bought it. That's not sponsored.
Nice. Somebody in chat just mentioned something that I didn't realize was a thing. They said if you have different documents open, you can middle mouse button click and it will close that document.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. I mean, there's also the little X you can click on, but middle mouse button's even better. You can have worse aim then. Cool. Well, thanks for the heads up, Mighty. Let's see. Was there any viewport performance increases for basic stuff like a lot of objects and or dynamics? I don't think there's anything along those lines, was there?
Nothing specifically. I mean, we're always working to improve stuff, and of course, the dynamics engine has, the GPU processing and things like that in the new cloth and rope simulations. But there wasn't specifically anything that I can think of that was a major improvement. But one thing I will mention that was actually partly in SP1, and we put a little bit of it in 26 as well, that may have gone unnoticed, is that users had been reporting issues with Cinema 4D slowing down after they rendered a lot. And we found out that was actually due to some Windows caching. And actually there was a little bit on the Mac too, but sort of the way that the caching was working in the picture viewer. And so we fixed that, and you should see, the performance stay, throughout your entire Cinema 4D session much better now.
Mm-hmm. Along the lines of the viewport, though, a lot of improvements have been made as far as representing Redshift in the viewport via the materials.
Definitely.
So that's a huge one, because a lot of people have been using Redshift for a while, and I'm sure most people like me have been dealing with having to turn all your materials off in your viewport and then change the lighting so that it's you just see like the blank model, you can actually work on it. But now the materials are supported just as well as any material in Cinema is, maybe even more. It's doing a great job of like translating over the color and the reflection, even the bump maps go through. There's a giant list of different channels that all work directly into your Redshift. But to do that, you have to be using one of the node-based materials, right?
Yep.
And there's two primary node-based materials right now. There's the new default Redshift material, but there's also the very important and new Redshift standard material. Do you want to chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the standard material is designed to be a more intuitive and sort of industry standard way of defining your materials. And we've, it's really the way that I think, most of the material creation is going to go. And it isn't yet the default, but it's probably going to be in the next version. We just really wanted to make sure that it was good and solid before we switched it to the default. But yeah, it's got fantastic new features too. It's got a new DEON porous surface BRDF. It's got thin film built in.
The thin film is nice. Yeah.
Much better energy conservation on multi-scattering. So definitely sort of the way to go for the future, and definitely encourage folks to play with that new standard material. And you're going to find that by going to Redshift Materials and choosing standard here. And when you get that, it'll pop up this material editor, and really, the simplified interface. These are all of the parameters right here accessible for you.
Yeah, and it's not super different than what it used to be. There's some tweaks, some things have gotten simplified. There's some new features, but the overall layout is similar to what we had. So I opened it up and I didn't feel lost in it at all.
Yeah, and it's important to note while you're working with this one, this button right here is super powerful. Like you can click on this and you can connect nodes, so you can start to build out this material before you jump into the full node editor. You can add textures, things like that, and then also we've done something special with this button in the node editor. One of the pieces of feedback we got a lot was something people like in the shader graph interface for Redshift is the ability to take a parameter and expose it by dragging it onto the editor. That still takes a drag though, and we actually did a behavior that I think's even cooler here in the new node editor, and that's you can simply control click on this dot, and it'll make that parameter visible on the node. So we can take any of these parameters, and this works with the attribute manager version of the material as well. If we want to have transmission color available, we can just control click that dot, and we can make those visible super easy that way.
Yeah, and that will pop open the node editor. It will highlight the material, the standard material in this case. It will create that input, and it will even highlight it. Even if you had all that already open and something else highlighted, it'll highlight the parameter you just clicked on. So it's a really quick way of jumping to that particular spot.
Yeah.
Somebody asked a question, which is going to be my next question anyway, and it goes to there is these Redshift nodes that are all kind of based on the new Cinema material nodes and the new kind of neutron type layout. Is there anything that we can't do in this setup that we used to be able to do in the old Espresso style one?
Yeah, the biggest thing is that the old Espresso style one allows direct access to objects in the C4D scene because it's Espresso. And then also it supports C4D shader emulation. So it sort of dynamically bakes the C4D shaders. And through that, you're also getting substance support as well because C4D shaders support substance. Those are certainly, differences that we're aware of and things that we're going to keep working to close the gap here because the node editor is sort of the future of how we envision people interacting with materials in Cinema 4D.
Let's see, we've got Tobias asking, and this was something that they were talking about in the Slack channel earlier, that the attribute manager, they really like the way the Espresso style had kind of a little attribute manager docked on the right side of the node editor. And they're kind of hoping that there could be like a little fly out button that would, dock it with it. Just so it's like on a per material basis, or if you're in a particular node, it's all kind of living in that space. So that's just a feature request somebody's talking about.
Yep, I definitely have heard that one before, and it's something we'll definitely consider.
Dean is talking about that the nodes are huge in the node editor, and I do agree. I want every pixel sucked out from there that I don't need because I want to squeeze as many nodes onto a screen at any given moment as possible. So a minimized mode would be definitely a feature request for me.
You do have the options to sort of drop down the ports that aren't being used and things like that. But, definitely sort of the overall look of the node editor and some of the user interface aspects are things that we're still iterating on.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. There's the new layer, the material layer, which is, I don't think it's completely replacing, but it's a new version of the material blender, right?
It's basically replacing the material blender, because this allows, a better, I don't know, how was it described to us yesterday, Chris? It does a better job of blending the materials in a way that the material layer didn't, or the material blender.
The blending material could leave holes in it, and this one won't. And I'm going to switch over to my screen for a second, and let me just open up a new file. Switch the renderer to Redshift mode. So that way, as I open new materials, it will create Redshift materials, although I want to make a standard material. So with that open, and I got to be careful because the streaming software gets upset when Redshift starts activating. I got to figure that out at some point. If we jump into the node editor, then you've kind of got the entire material essentially is living inside of this standard material. So you have the ability to duplicate it and make a completely different unrelated material. and you could feed one or the other through. But if we take this one and say, actually, that one should look like it's made out of metal, and I don't expect these to refresh very quickly because my GPUs are working on the live stream. But we have two different materials here. So if I double click and search for the word layer, we have the new material layer. And this one is way simplified versus the Blender. Oh, there, it did pop in. So here's sort of a plastic, and I could say, okay, our base material, and I can drag that in and say the base material is that. And then the secondary one, a layer on top of it, is this one. And then via a mask, you could blend between those however you want. So we could grab something like a ramp and feed that through as our mask. And then that can be fed out as your final surface. So that simple as that, you can combine two different materials. But you can go even further where these could start getting layered on top of each other. So in theory, we could make a third material and then feed that again through here, so that one becomes the base. The result of these two become what you can blend on top of it, and the ability to start stacking these on top of each other, so you could have a layer of gravel, and then on top of that a layer of dirt, and on top of that a layer of moss, and all of those are different materials self-contained within, say, this node right here and all of its connections, and then blend them however you want. So I think that's a really intuitive workflow. That's the way a couple of different renderers work as well, I think.
Yeah, and there was a question about supporting multiple layers in this material layer node, and I that is in the plans. I think I can say this is sort of the first iteration of that material layer node. So stay tuned for more updates there.
Excellent. Somebody was asking if it's possible to turn off those refreshing. I think there is.
It is. There's actually a new preference in the preferences for Redshift for the material previews. You can turn them off, or you can have them only refresh when the renderer is idle, or you can have them on. The one thing is, if you turn them off, they're off everywhere, not just in the node view, but also in the sort of material preview, in the material manager preview and the attribute manager as well. Mm-hmm. I usually like to turn that to when renderer is idle. That's actually the default behavior from prior Redshift before this version. This version introduced the new on, which actually introduces a new behavior because folks wanted their previews updated more proactively. So when your IPR is running, it'll actually, and it needs to update a preview, it'll actually sort of dynamically in the background pause the IPR for just a second, render your material previews, and then go back to the IPR rendering.
Interesting.
While we're here in the preferences, I'll also mention another really cool preference that I love that we added in 26, which is if you go to the material tab, there's a new preference for the viewport preview. You'll note that in the viewport, we always had that option for the resolution of the textures in the viewport, and it was always set to default, but there was no way to change the default. Well, we've made a way for you to change the default now, so you can change that to say 1024, and now all of your textures, when you first import them, are going to immediately, look much crisper in the viewport. So the one thing to remember is that this does take up GPU RAM, and also when you're importing scenes, it can take a little bit longer to import the scene because it's generating a higher res texture.
Mm-hmm. This is definitely a very nice addition. We've had that at that default of 256, right, for how many years now?
Yeah. Several GPU versions at least.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit, but speaking of importing, let me open up a new file here, and let's talk a little bit about the task manager. And because I've got it up and ready, I'm going to go into my demo folders, and in this folder, I've got 3 different CAD files. I showed this in my What's New video, but I think this is really cool. In the previous versions of Cinema, if you wanted to open up your CAD files, one had to completely finish before you could do anything. And so if I dragged all 3 in, it's going to try and finish one, and then that one will finish, and it'll pop up and say, how do you want to import the second one? And then you have to click and wait. Depending on the CAD file, it could take 10 seconds, but it could take an hour for a CAD file to come in because those things can be like super crazy and huge, and there's a bunch of interpretation happening. But now, inside of this version of Cinema, I can drag 3 different files over. We got 2 different step files, and now it's going to ask for the import settings of all of them. So I'm going to say yes for that one. The other 2 are both steps, so it's going to see them at the same time. And now down here, there's the new task manager, and you can see all 3 of them simultaneously being imported. So, and not only that, we are able, I'm going to pin this so it doesn't disappear. Oop, okay, the first one came in, but I'm free to work on the scene. I can be manipulating this. Second one just opened, and it immediately opens up the file. Of course, it's super easy to jump back to the other if you want to continue working on something. But I think that's actually, I don't know what my preference would be, but it definitely opens up the new file. But that's a good indication of like, oh, that finished. So all three of those got imported way quicker than it would have been in previous versions, and you can keep on working while it's going. And then, yeah, middle mouse button, and you can close the different files. That's nice.
Yeah,
and then
totally. And the ability to just select multiple files. I know from the plugin development standpoint, there's been so many times I've needed that in a plugin I was building.
Yes, just to throw it out there, I'm just going to hit Control or Command Open, or Control O to open. And here is a bunch of the demo files from my presentation. And here's a bunch of the title cards. I can select all of those. In R25, you could only select one, but now I can select a bunch of them and say, go ahead and open those. And the task manager, it's so quick because these are easy files, but all of them opened very quickly and you see them all queued up. But instantly, all of those got opened up in this top bar. Easy to go and start jumping through them, see the different ones. So yeah, opening up multiple files, another very nice addition there. Let's see. I'm going to jump back into the chat, see what people are talking about.
There's some more questions about the task manager and about canceling the tasks. I mean, in general, with anything in Cinema 4D, hitting escape will cancel the task eventually. Sometimes it takes a little bit because those test breaks and adding them in the code, it takes time it slows things down basically to have those test breaks in the code. So we only have them every so often. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it can take a while for it to hit the next test break and have escape be captured. I think it's the same basic principle with the task manager as well. But the task manager is built on an entirely new sort of background job task API that's available to all of our developers. So they have the ability to code more and more of these asynchronous tasks that show up in the task manager.
Zach is mentioning something, and I gotta say it's somewhat been my experience as well. I've heard if you hit escape, you can get out of a process. Here's a question. If something is working on a process, let's say a Voronoi fracture is like super subdividing everything with all the different cells. I'm not sure where the breaks are in there that's taking a look at it. If I just hit escape one time, if I just click it really quick, has that now been queued up and it's going to see that? Or would you have to continuously hold down escape until it happened to catch one of those breaks during the processing time?
I think it's queued up. I'm not sure because, I'm sure most of the viewers and C4D users, anytime it occurs to me, all I can do is just sit there and spam the escape key.
Yeah, I've typically I just hold it down. I don't know if that's spamming it. I don't know if that's a good idea, but yeah, it does go to, you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have done that, escape. And it does feel like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it could just be that it's a process that's like, there is no interrupting it. It's got to do this one giant thing. So yeah, that gets tricky. Yeah. Let's see. Demi's saying that, this spring release was unexpectedly packed with lots of features. And then, they're saying in contrast to S24, which is a little bit of a smaller release, but it just goes to, at any given point, like Maxon's probably got dozens of different projects going in parallel. And when something finishes up, it's now being available to be released in any given cycle, right?
Yeah, I mean the simulation and Redshift CPU especially have been long-term projects that we've been working on for a while, and they just both happened to hit the station at the same time. We talk about release trains, and those two trains happened to hit the station at the same time in 26. Also, we've kind of had a little bit of an imbalance in sort of the length of development time that we have for the releases. The releases that come out in the fall are a very short development cycle between spring and fall, whereas from fall to spring we have a longer time with fewer summer vacations and holidays and things like that. We're kind of going to be moving forward doing development a little bit better, a little bit differently, to have the trains hopefully be a little more offset and to have things come out on a more regular basis to users. Our goal is to get user value in folks' hands as quickly as possible and as frequently as possible.
Yes, and I mean, I do love the giant releases, and I've been saying it for years now. But we should keep in mind that we've been getting 2 versions of cinema every year for a couple of years now, where kind of a R release and an S release. Those would have been combined into one bigger release. But on top of that, you've been doing monthly releases with the asset browser. Even Rocket Lasso spent 3 months making a couple different assets, and those were like almost full-on plugins as far as their functionality, like huge tools like we would make for ourselves. And those are just appearing for people essentially if they have the newest version of cinema. They were just getting them for free. So
yeah, folks should definitely be keeping an eye on that asset browser, and especially the what's new section there. There's a smart folder. Let's see, what's it called exactly? New content. And there are new capsules coming out all the time, whether it be a static mesh or a model or that's a mesh or a material. We're going to be starting to populate a whole bunch of Redshift materials in here. But probably the best capsules I've seen in a long time that we've added are these great new FUI graph and grid modules that Rocket Lasso helped us out on creating.
yes, those were really fun to put together. It's fun to go super deep into the world of the new nodes in cinema. So it's an exciting new world. And I'm definitely going to be focusing on that for people more in the future. There were even some new features involving some scene node stuff, some things with splines, but they were kind of, it wasn't a huge part, and I didn't think it was too applicable to people. So I figured I'll do a focused video on scene nodes upcoming. But somebody's asking, and I think it might be a good time to talk about the ZReMesher. Do you have a demo for that, or should I make something up as the stream going? Is that, what do I find there? Just bottle?
Yeah, just search for bottle. Yeah,
bottle 1 maybe?
That one, yep.
So let's drag this over. Actually, we'll drag it into the viewport. There we go. So let's take a look at this again. So yeah, here's the raw objects. And you can see we've got some nice, super dense meshes on that already. But then let's turn on that volume builder. Take a look at it. It's a voxel size of 1, which is pretty detailed. And then turn on the overall bottle. So yeah, this is just the bottles mesh. So if I hide that, you can see the cap was actually separate. Probably looks like it's in its own volume, honestly, but it's not. All right, so now with all of that, you see that, I mean, it's looking good, but of course the mesh density is so crazy deep. It is, the volume builder always gave such great results, but they were so unusable in so many different contexts. But anyway, now we have the brand new updated remesh. And the remesh was introduced, I think, the last version using the instant mesh algorithm, but now you've got the ZReMesher algorithm built in there. So dropping that bottle into the ZReMesher version, it's going to calculate that through. And currently, I think it's looking at whatever the current polygon count of the bottle is, and it's going to attempt to match that the best it can. So that's quite a few different polygons, so it's going to take a bit for that to run through. But now that it has, we're going to see a similar polygon count, but a way cleaner distribution of where all of those polygons have gone. And you can see how it's following the curvature here, which is just amazing. I'm sure people who've been using ZBrush for a while are like, oh yeah, we've been doing that forever. But for us over here in vanilla cinema, like, this is incredible. To go further, I'm going to pull this way down. Let's go to 10% of the mesh density. And give that some time. It's got to reprocess. And I'll also pop open a text object to show that real quick. Because, well, actually, we can probably save that until we're talking about the dynamics. But yeah, here's now 10% of those polygons and looking way cleaner still. Like, oh man, you could totally like work from this to properly make a final model. And I don't even know how far we can go. I'm gonna drop this down to 2%. So we might be going a bit far for the reduction, but let's just see what it does.
And the great thing about ZReMesher's algorithm too is it actually has adaptiveness built in. So
Yes.
you're able to put more polygons in the places where it matters. It detects edges, so that it helps to preserve those. And you have the options to turn on symmetry and even to define flow splines so that certain areas, the mesh flow flows in a certain direction.
Yeah. What does the detect hard edges do exactly? Is
Well,
that
what
the
it's actually
finding of the adaptiveness?
Yeah, what it's actually doing is it's telling the algorithm to try to keep those edges rather than sort of blurring them across new polygons, and it can do that either based on the shading breaks or it has sort of like an automatic method.
Hmm. But yeah, going into more detail on the adaptiveness, I found this setting's amazing, and it's so simple. Like using this tool, you only have to worry about two settings really: your mesh density and your adaptiveness, and everything else is bonus additional power. But right now, it's 50% adaptive, and you can definitely see there's way more detail down in these lines where it needs it, and in these giant flat areas, it doesn't need anywhere near as many polygons. But you can imagine a lot of circumstances where like, yeah, it's nice to get that extra detail, but if I was going to be running a dynamic sim on this, I want the polygons to be very evenly sized. So by just grabbing this adaptiveness and dragging it down to 0, I'm going to say, actually, don't adapt, don't give extra polygons into a particular spot. Have it be all as even as possible. And having done that, let that finish up. And there you go. And now you can see that the model is still looking pretty good, but now this polygon's pretty much the same as this polygon, which is the same as that polygon. So yeah, having that evenness with that single slider, like, oh, it's so good. It's so intuitive to use. I love it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of questions about what it does with the mesh attributes like UVs or vertex maps, vertex paint, things like that. It does its best attempt at preserving them. However, it's important to keep in mind that you're completely changing the topology of the object. So especially in the case of UVs, the places where the UV island seams were, there's no edge there anymore to create that seam. So it's sort of does its best, but it's not.
It's not going to be a magic one-click solution.
But there is another interesting note is that we've added a capsule for the automatic UV method that we have built into the UV tools. So that Ministry of Flat algorithm, you can now make use of that in a procedural way by using the automatic UV capsule. Next one.
Is it this UV to mesh?
Next one over.
Oh, there we go. Let's make it a little bigger so I can, actually, let's make it a list so we can read it. Yeah, automatic UV. Okay, I didn't play with that one yet. That's pretty neat. We're not set up for UVs here, so this wouldn't be a good demo.
Yeah.
But while we're here, I thought maybe I can transition a little bit into some of the new modeling tools inside of Cinema. I guess you could think of the ReMesher as a modeling tool, even though I feel like this is as much a MoGraph tool as anything because, and setting things up for dynamics. And, if I was cloning a bunch of spheres onto here, those spheres will be very evenly sized if they're based off the polygons or the edges. So yeah, ZReMesh, great for so many different places. I don't think I'm going to do a single live stream from now until forever that doesn't use the remesh multiple times.
Totally.
Having said that, I'm going to make this, because we got a decent model here for it, I'm going to just make this editable and let's take a look at a couple of the tools. And Rick, if I do anything wrong here or if I'm missing a detail, please let me know. Something I saw a demo happening pretty often was making a handle on something, and I didn't think of that use case. So I'm going to select a cluster of 3x3 and 3x3, hit the letter B for the new and improved bridge tool, and drag a connection between them. And that should automatically bridge them. Let's do a couple of subdivisions here. But then people were, okay, it's as simple as that. I wasn't doing it in this application. I was like, why would I want to put a curve there? But now it makes sense to me. So yeah, just by adding in some tension, look at that automatic handle we've created. Very, very nice. Okay, that's cool. Then there's spin steps. I don't know if we had this before, but I really like these spin steps because what it's doing, let me pull back on that tension. I guess it's not the best example for it. I'll set up a different one for that. But yeah, I'm super digging this bridge. Something else that's cool is even if you connect kind of, let's see if it does in this instance. Yeah, even if I connect kind of the wrong corner to the wrong corner, it's like, no, that's not right. And it fixes it for you. So another nice addition. Having done that, we can move into a couple of the other tools. Let's do a couple of loop selections on the edge here. And then there are two new tools, which might be relevant here. We've got the set flow, which I don't have an amazing intuition for, and then equal spacing. So grabbing equal spacing, it's very straightforward. I can click and drag, and it's going to perfectly distribute all of those so that the same distance is from there to there as from here to here, and the equivalent on the bottom. And that's going to be really useful in a lot of different places if you want things to get really evened out. Even on certain characters, like when you're doing some character modeling, that could be relevant. set flow, yeah, I don't have a good intuition. Like when I create it right here and I click and drag by the default, I'm like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing with this tool?
Set flow works a lot better when you've got something that isn't already curved, because what it does is it takes and it sort of adds the curvature in.
Okay. Well, let's flatten this out then. So let's see, what tool would that be?
Maybe just undo it and re-bridge without the tension.
Well, if I turn on, well, I'm going back to the equal spacing. If we turn on linear, then they'll automatically get evenly spaced and be a straight line now. So now you're saying if I go to the set flow.
Yeah, but you'll want to like take that middle loop, say, and drag that out so that you've got some.
Oh, I see. So something like that.
Yeah, you need some directionality to it.
Okay, I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to store the selection and then pull out this loop. And now double clicking, I get those all selected. Is that what I want to do? And now try a set flow?
Give it a shot. And I'm not sure if this is quite going to do it yet or not.
Equal spacing. Nope, not equal spacing. Nope. And it might be some of these other modes. Nope. Yeah, I've had a little bit of trouble. I'm sure it's working. I just am not using it in the proper application right now. Oh, yeah, and the maximum angle is a big one. There we go. You got to crank the maximum angle up because of those sharp angles. Yeah. So there we go. Yeah, we were able to blend between one extreme and the others and get something nice and smooth, even though we didn't have it. So actually, yeah, that's really great. So in the proper circumstance, that's going to be amazing. And then while we're here, I'm going to undo, and then back to here. And let's jump into one of my favorite new tools in Cinema is, let me select just a cluster of polygons here, and even grow. Right click and go to fit circle, and we can click and drag, and it's going to pop those polygons into a perfect circular shape. And then I think we can even say project to surface. When I click project to surface, is it from my current camera angle or based on like its original average normal? I'm not sure what that key's off of.
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to refer to the documentation or the developer. I think it's actually not dependent on the camera angle, though.
Okay. I'll shrink that. So now I've kind of got a little bit of a transition into a circle, and now I'm going to force this into a full-on circle, but don't project onto the surface. And then hit the letter D for extrude, push that in, I for inner extrude, pull that in a bit. And now taking this entire model, throwing that into a subdivision surface, look at this beautiful smooth transition from one bit of the model to the other. I could probably do a little bit more smoothing here. Let's see if a loop is going to cooperate. Yeah, it's a little bit picky there. Yeah, I don't want to spend a bunch of time doing a careful selection, but I will. Let's do a free. That wasn't so bad. So yeah, we do that, and now, we'll transition into also showing one of my favorite ones, which is smooth edges. So if we do that, that's going to smooth that out. Let me grow that. Can I smooth those as well? Actually, yeah, look at that really nice transition between them now. So that might help with the way the subdivision surface is working, looking nice and smooth. But then this is going to kind of break the model a bit. But if I go and make a random selection here, I'm trying to think what the practical applications are of this. Just doing character modeling, I would imagine is a big one. And I thought it was pretty cool even doing the spiral effect from my video. I'll do that again. So we've kind of just got this crazy zigzaggy connection. But if I right click and say smooth the edges, it's going to average all those out, and we get a nice, clean, flowing line that's essentially transitioning all of the points around it into this new shape. And this has now created a lot of, it just goes through, I'm trying to imagine how I would have gone about doing something like this in the past. And it's like, it's so quick and smooth and intuitive, and yet not what I was expecting. So yeah, I really dig that tool as a way of changing the flow of your overall mesh.
Yeah, and one of the great uses for this is with our new cloth tools, because you can actually create a smooth edge for the tearing.
I see.
To tear along. I think that was shown in our in the modeling video on the Maxon website. Also, I'll mention that Fritz just popped into chat and said that reproject is using the closest point on the original surface.
The closest point on the original surface, but via what projection? The closest point on the original surface.
I think just projecting from the surface itself.
Okay, so like the individual normals cast out, grab that and pull it back, presumably. Okay. What am I missing with the modeling? Did you have any other modeling demos you want to pull up? I know I didn't talk about all the tools. Oh, and the bridge tool does. Oh, let me do a couple bridge tool things because it's pretty impressive. And I am not expert in this, and there are way better applications of it. But let me just go to selection tool, and I'm going to just grab a crazy random thing and delete that hole. And then, actually, no, here's close polygon hole. That's what I want to do. MD is a shortcut for close polygon hole. But there's a new mode called grid. And just by switching it to that new mode, if I go over this hole and close it, it is now perfectly repaired that hole. Now, there were no extra points in there for it to know. It's just seeing the way the polygons are flowing and interconnecting them properly. Let's grab a larger patch here, delete, and again, MD, and close that hole, and perfect patch again. Like even trying to match the curvature the best that it can. Like I can't believe how well this algorithm is working.
And again, the beautiful thing about all of these modeling tools is that thanks to the modeling core that we've been working on over the course of the last several years, these are all doing a great job of preserving topology and interpolating UVs and things like that as you do all of these things. And also thanks to the modeling core and sort of its portability, all of a lot of these tools, as you've noted, are available in in the C nodes as geometry modifier capsules as well.
Yeah, if we go into our geometry modifiers in this list, you're going to see a whole bunch of those new tools. I'm not sure if they're all in this list specifically.
I think they all are.
Yeah, like fit circles right there, and poke polygons. Oh, yeah, poke polygons.
Yeah, and the great thing is this is entirely procedural. So you could create a selection, you could store that selection on the object, you could add a poke polygons, and create a knurled surface along a ring of polygons there on that bottle, for instance, and then adjust that selection later if you wanted a different set of polygons to be affected, or if you wanted to extrude it differently. The procedural workflows are kind of the king of C4D, and so it's great to see these modeling tools not just in an interactive form, although that's great, but also in sort of that procedural form as well through the capsules.
Yeah, the day that it's introduced in the artistic active tool, we also get the equivalent in the scene nodes. And along those lines, by request, somebody wants to see the poke polygons. So let's drag the procedural version of that, the capsule, in and hit NB. And you can see what it's doing is making a point in the middle of every single polygon and then connecting that. So it's kind of like a super triangulate. And then there's essentially only a single parameter on here, but it's pretty cool. We can grab the offset and poke them all out or all in, and you get a super spiky bottle here. And again, procedural, so I can turn that off and turn it back on again. We could limit it to a particular selection. And something I've been thinking, I haven't gotten to explore it too much, I've done it a bit, but you can imagine if we were going to be running some of the new cloth simulations, we can subdivide this a bit, then make a procedural poke, hit NB, and then you can see it's subdivided in a way more interesting way. So maybe this model can tear in ways that it couldn't before, or deform in a different way because it's not so kind of mechanically geometric. So yeah, some cool opportunities there as well. I'm also excited with how many new modeling tools came out in this version. Like these are, I don't use too many other software packages, so I often don't know what we're missing. And we got this entire collection, and immediately it's like, wow, I don't know how we were living without that tool, or how we were living without that tool. So very, very exciting. Let's see. Somebody's asking how they get their R25 assets into the asset browser in 26.
So with your R25, with your asset browser databases, those are independent. Well, there's two choices. When you add assets to the database, you can store them in the preferences, or you can store them in a standalone database. I would always recommend storing them in a standalone database, because then you can just link to that standalone database in 26 and you'd have access to all of those assets.
Yeah.
If you stored them in the preferences, what you can do is select them and copy them in the asset browser. You can select them and copy them to a different database, and copy them to a standalone database.
Okay, that makes sense. And yeah, and then you can just, even double click in this version of Cinema, go into the other, and then paste it in, and then you would be linking to that again. So yeah, You should go and make your own custom databases and don't put them in the preferences by default to make it easier to transfer. Somebody's asking about quad cap, but that sounds like that is just the new closed polygon hole mode.
Yeah, so if you want to do this, Chris, just go ahead and create a cylinder and turn off the caps. And this is something that would be a good option for improving, is to do this sort of procedurally as part of the cylinder. But now if you make that cylinder editable, Chris,
Yep.
and you can go use closed polygon hole with the grid.
Boop.
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, let's subdivide that some more. Let's do 64, see what that does. Make that editable. Close. Ah, lovely. Look at that. Nice. Then, did I miss any big modeling tools there?
I think we hit them all.
Let's see. Tobias is on the ball as always, telling everybody that you should join in on the Slack channel. We have a Rocket Lasso Slack channel. You can join for free. Just head on over to rocketlasso.com/community, or just go to the rocketlasso.com. You can see a link on the main page and you can sign up there. I put a link in the chat. Let's see. Somebody's asking that they'd like to control the rotation of this map. And you and I were talking a little bit about that there is a bit of control about where you start it, but it's not very visual and it can be a little bit finicky. So yeah, a spin on that would be super helpful for us, a future iteration. But yeah, I love the closed polygon hole now. Goes along with the bridge, just working great. I'm trying to think of what else we should jump in. Hey, Miso. I'm just checking the chat, seeing what else we got. What are some other features we haven't talked about besides the simulations? Obviously, we're saving that one.
Let's see here.
I feel like we've missed a couple things. Oh, we haven't talked about, they're kind of straightforward, but there's the new hammer, new hammer weights. Pretty straightforward. I don't have a great demo except for the one I already did. And it is the kind of thing, it's a tool that's going to solve a very specific problem to a handful of people who are doing like some really detailed character rigging. And hang on. I've got a problem with my second monitor where it's randomly turning off and usually just blinks, but this time, of course, it just turned off fully. So, and
between your monitor turning off and my monitor tearing,
yeah, I'm gonna have to. I just have to get a new monitor, and I'm jiggling the wires, and it's going to do one of its. It doesn't want to wake back up again, so now I have to pull the HDMI out, force everything onto my main monitor, and I'm going to switch over to your screen, Rick, while I fix this.
Okay.
Okay, and we're back, and you're in control. So the monitor is still blinking a bit, but I think the stream is up and running. And I'm going to leave this on your monitor, so if something goes wrong here, we can continue to deal with it. So we're going to stay in this format for a while, everybody.
Okay.
So where were we? Sorry about that, everybody.
Oh, I was going to show, I'll show this USD import quickly, and then we'll jump into simulation. So this is the NVIDIA Attic scene. Everybody's used to this, has seen this before, but here you can say target is Redshift now. And when we go ahead and click OK, what it's going to do is import all of those materials as Redshift materials. So I'll go ahead and here and activate the camera. And there's some lights that are a little bit like bright in here, so I'll just turn those off. And you can see combination of that improved texture preview resolution and then creating all of these Redshift materials automatically comes in really great, and it's a great starting point for developing your scene further when you're importing from another app.
Yeah, that looks great.
And then we can jump into simulation. So I want to credit, you guys have probably seen a preview of this a couple times here. I want to credit Quasar, Yan Gi, who has created some fantastic cloth demo scenes that he posted on Twitter, and he shared them graciously with me. You can see some of the great stuff that you can do with this new cloth simulation engine. This one is super fun. We've got balloon deformation. So we're able to add pressure in here, and then I've just created a sphere here as a collider. And this is just fun to play with. It really is. And that's the great thing about the cloth and rope simulation. It's just fun to play with.
Yep. Dynamics are always fun.
And you hit so much fewer of the sort of blockers that you've had before. You can support tons and tons of cloth objects. I mean, here we've got cloth that's through a cloner, which was not possible before. And you can actually simulate all of these many pieces of cloth all at the same time. And all of this is processing on either the GPU or the CPU. So, of course, I'm on an Apple Silicon machine, so it's a little bit the same thing, but it's different cores. But here in the simulation settings, you have the option to choose between CPU and GPU. So you can get really great performance out of your GPU on your system as well. Yeah, anything to add there, Chris? I can pull up some demo scenes, of course.
Yeah, as far as the cloth, I haven't done any stuff where I'm trying to tie it in with a character. Last night I was trying to do some stuff where I was trying to build like an Indiana Jones bridge type thing, like a rope bridge. And even that, I thought of like 4 or 5 different ways I might be able to do different combinations of like, doing it all as geometry and transferring it to a spline, or doing a series of ropes and interconnecting them to different planks. Like there's so many different possibilities. It's crazy. Like I went a little bit light on the demoing of the new simulation stuff because next week I'm going to be presenting on, I guess not Wednesday, it's going to be Monday. I'm going to be presenting a bunch of stuff all about these new simulations with cloth and rope.
I think this may not have been fully set up yet. Oh, you can see it's almost there. We probably just need some more sub steps.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. So definitely another bridge going. It looks like they have really large connections going. The connector.
Yeah, there was another version. I think I didn't open the right version of this file, but I'm trying to find the right one and I don't see it. But the cool thing about this is, again, the cloth and rope simulation supports all of the objects in your scene just by default. So, we can do things like I can let's create a circle here. I'll just make it an ellipse. We'll bring this down. We'll go ahead and make this quite a bit smaller, actually. And then we can go ahead and add a cloner. And we'll put this in linear mode. And let's just go ahead and have every other clone 90 degrees. So we create sort of a chain type setup. And we'll go ahead and just create a cylinder here. And we will make it into a collider. So we'll just go ahead and right click here, simulation collider. We'll go in here and simulation rope, and that applies to all of those. And so we get these ropes. Again, you may want to adjust things like your radius. So I usually increase this, and your substeps, and then you've also got the collision passes and the polish collisions, polish iterations. These are good things to adjust. To get a little bit more fidelity in your simulation. You can get really nice simulations like this. Of course, you could then sweep that. You can also connect these things. So if we create a plane, and we'll go ahead and orient this like that, we can put that here, and we can make this a cloth object. And again, we don't have to make it editable or anything anymore. These splines, it's simulating on the interpolated points, whereas in the past, the spline dynamics were simulated just on the actual vertices. So way more flexible, especially when dealing with parametric objects. So we've got a cloth on the plane here, and what we can do is go ahead and create a connection. So we'll go ahead and create a connector. And these are dynamic connections. They're created based on those interpolated points on both objects. So we can go ahead and adjust the radius here. Actually, this plane, let's go ahead and sort of increase the segments here. And we'll go back to the connector, and I'm not sure what scale of scene I'm working on now. Yeah, there you see. We've got a connector that's been created right here, and we've actually got cloth that's being connected to splines dynamically. These connectors can do some really cool stuff too with something like a spider web is sort of the example that a lot of folks have been going to, which is right here. Again, this is Yangi's scene. Anything you see that looks great is Yangi. Anything that looks bad is me. So here you can see we've just got a bunch of splines that are overlapping, and if we just start simulating, everything's going to kind of fall apart, right? But thanks to this connector, we can just select all of these connector tags and go ahead and hit create. And it's dynamically creating connections based on that search radius, just based on the interpolated points of the spline. So now when we hit play, you can see that the whole spider web sticks together. Really, really great stuff with the new cloth and spline simulations. Looking to see. Here's another example here with some chains. The chains themselves are cloned onto the spline. So what we have here is splines that are being simulated. Yeah. Right. And then we've cloned onto the fat ropes. Yeah. Yeah. And then let's see, we've got noodles. So again, this is using the spline dynamics. What the one thing that you will see is when you're using the GPU, it needs to load the objects into the GPU. So when you very first start to simulate, sometimes there'll be a delay while it loads all those objects into the GPU, especially if you're loading a lot of objects or
look at that. That looks awesome. I like how perfect they all were until they finally start the collision. And that already looks delicious.
Yeah, so beautiful stuff there. This one's even all set up for Redshift rendering with the new standard surface. Although, seems pretty bright.
That's a bright one.
Probably the dome light isn't linked here in this case, but yeah, great stuff with that. Seeing if I have. Here's another example of connectors with cloth. So let me rewind here.
It's hiding somewhere.
There you go.
There it is.
So again, here what we've got is two pieces of cloth, and they're dynamically connected together. And these connectors can tear too when they reach a certain, when they get past their current length. So you could do something like this. We could set the stretchiness up. I haven't played with the scene, so these settings could completely blow everything down. But yeah, see now those tear. Of course, you can animate that tearing. Let's maybe increase this to, I don't know, 250 and see if that keeps it together now. No, because we increased that stretchiness so much. Let's take this down to like 0.5 maybe. There we go. So now they stay together. But then if we drop this tear past, they'll tear apart. You can also do things like actually create connections on the same object. I don't have a good demo scene set up for this, but you can create connections among the same object to create puckering and sort of adjust the target length of those connections. So lots of fun stuff that you can do with the new cloth and spline simulation.
The stuff gets simulation. It gets so crazy so quickly. But the big thing to me is the connector tool is so simple. There's very few settings on it. It's pretty much like, hey, do you want to connect to other objects? Do you want to connect to this object? Mm-hmm. And I would have thought that would have been very limiting, but I haven't run into an instance where it didn't work almost immediately the way I wanted it to.
Yeah. And there was a question I noticed about vertex maps. They're a little hidden because they're behind a twirly. So all of these things do have vertex map links. You just have to twirl down in order to access them. So yeah, you have a lot of control over all of the aspects. And then the tearing, where is that file? The tearing is much better in this new cloth. It actually, whereas the previous cloth would actually,
the polygons on either side of the seam would disappear.
Right. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to look for a file at the same time as I talk, and
yes,
every now and then that fails. Here we go. So previously the polygons would disappear, but now it's actually creating new edges where the tear is happening. You get a much more realistic tearing happening. I think that other bend may be in, or that other bridge may be in here too. Let me see.
Were these files created by that same person?
These files here were by Rodrigo, who's one of our QA members.
Oh, yeah.
This file here.
Yeah, I just want to make sure to give credit. So these were by Rodrigo. Yeah, and he had a whole bunch of different files, just like totally stress testing the entire system.
Yeah, so there's a rope bridge. Yeah, so really great stuff here. You had some, I guess you probably can't share your screen right now, but you had some great stuff that you had created with the combination of your spline plugins and the rope dynamics.
Yeah, I'll do some rope stuff here. I'm just worried about losing the monitor entirely, but I'll risk it now. And then if there's somebody in the chat, Rick, in the Twitch chat, who's having some trouble with transferring their files, I was wondering if you could take a look at their chat and maybe type to them if there's any fix for that. But in the meantime, I'm going to switch over to my screen and take over and spend some time talking about some of the tearing and some more of those connections, especially using splines. And this system is so fun. It's reminding me back in the days of like R12 with dynamics and then R12.5 when the connectors came out. And yeah, just a very exciting time to be playing with Cinema 4D. Now, some super basics that I had already shown a little bit. Let's make a figure actually. And on the figure, we'll throw that into a volume builder, feed that into a volume mesher. And then we need to up the resolution there a bit. So maybe 5, let's do 3. Let's do 2, why not? And then inflate that a bit. Increase, let's do an offset of 1. There, just a little bit more to it overall. And then you'll see this process over and over again from me, where I'll feed that into a remesh. And that remesh, set that to make some nice clean polygons overall. Drop the count here, maybe to 25%. Don't be adaptive. I want a very even polygon count everywhere. So you can see I've got a very nice clean model. We can do the mirroring here. So we want to, is it mirror on X? I think it is mirror on X. It's not gonna make too much of a difference, but now it's gonna be symmetrical left and right. It gets weird if you do it on one or the other axis. So you can see we get 2 pairs of feet facing up and down. And then, yeah, we can fully mirror it on every axis. So that's gonna look pretty crazy. So let's mirror it just on the appropriate one, which is X. And having done that, let's start playing around with it. My first thought is let's go into our simulation, Control D. And under simulation, as I mentioned in my main video, I've got some sort of problem with my GPU that I need to figure out. So I have to run on CPU because that one just runs better for me. But to begin with, I think I would like to put a floor. Why not? Go a little bit lower. A couple extra subdivisions there, 15, 15. And make that into a simulation collider and a simulation cloth. Now you already saw a bunch of it straight out of the gate where we can hit play. That's going to fall to the ground. We got kind of a nice noodly guy. Something that is super fun was that balloon stuff, and you saw it a little bit in that cat demo. But by opening up balloon, we can set the internal pressure, and this only works if it's a volume. So currently the pressure is 1, so it's kind of equivalent inside and outside. But by increasing it to something like 2, it's now going to be trying to maintain well, it's inflating its volume a little bit extra. You can see it's trying to keep its shape a bit more. Something that's
Volume,
cool.
just for clarification, means a closed surface. Right.
Yes,
Not,
exactly. Yeah,
not a
yeah, a model
volume
that will
object.
hold water. So you can see as I inflate this, it's trying to maintain the shape and fill it up a little bit more. Now, what I've been entertaining myself with is overpressuring something with a very quick expansion time. I'll turn that off for a moment, and then combine that with tearing. So if we activate the tearing, anything that stretches beyond, is it stretches beyond or bends beyond 150?
I think either, maybe.
Now we do have a map in there that we can remap, which could be powerful. I haven't gotten to explore it fully, so I'm not confident in explaining that. But if we just hit play right now, we won't see much. I'll lower this way down to like 105. So if it bends just a little bit, we should start getting some tears. And yeah, immediately you see this character starts falling apart. And the best part is we're not losing any of the polygons. Where these two, we have a seam right there tearing in between the two, but those polygons didn't disappear where they would have in the past. So having done that, what I like doing is let's put the tear back to its default and rewind. Oh, by the way, here's something that's really great. These tags are effectively behaving like a deformer, where the old soft bodies would actually manipulate the points of the object, and I think it would have to create a cache of what it originally looked like. So it's possible to accidentally delete the tag or make a change at the wrong time, and it would kind of bake the simulation into the model as it was, and there was no way to undo it. It would just be lost. This is a deformer, so it will always reset. Essentially, it can't break the model, which is wonderful. So now that it has the ability to tear, I will start to inflate it, and it's going to currently take 30 frames for it to inflate, but I'll drop that time down to 5, and let's see what that does. And you can see that it did work here, but very quickly it's going to inflate. And as it inflates, it goes beyond that 150, and it's now torn. Because it's torn, no longer is the pressure being applied. It's almost as if the balloon popped, and you see these different tears happening. Now, Rick, I don't have a great intuition for the tear guiding. What can you describe tear guiding instead of me making a guess?
So if you visualize where the tearing is happening, where the constraint is stretching, basically the tear guiding is determining what angle, what field of view from that tear to look at when creating the tear.
So is a larger number going to make it more likely to turn, or a smaller number?
A smaller number is going to make a more precise tear, I think, is how I remember it.
So 0% would be kind of following along a particular line.
Yeah.
So if we go up to 90, and 90 is the max. So in theory, it could make up to 90-degree turns here. So let's hit play and pop. And yeah, well, even here you see that it's super exploded out. And all this, there's no keyframes anywhere. We're just over pressurizing it. So it pops based on this tearing, and we see all the polygons. So instantly we get this ribbon pile, collapses to the ground. Like, I don't know, that's so much fun for me. And this is not even going into our ability later to drive these things with vertex maps, which are being driven via fields to make all sorts of crazy complex setups. Now, moving on, I'll open up a new file, and I just want to create a collection of splines. I'm trying to think of what a good setup would be. Maybe even something a little bit crazy. I'm trying to think of what we can drop it on. Actually, let's just steal that. We'll stay in the same scene, and instead of this model being cloth, I'll copy the collider tag onto it. And no bounce, lots of friction. And I have no idea how well this will work, but creating a text spline, and let's just say S26, and set that into the middle, shrink it a bit. And my thought is just feed that into a cloner, make a whole pile of them directly on top of each other. So let's do 5 by 5 by 5 with pretty much no spacing in between them. So I got a bunch of them. Randomize. So I'll create a random, and let's do a random scale as well. So I'll do a uniform scale, shrinking some of them, and a whole bunch of rotation. 90, 90, 90. Okay, so we just got this giant cluster of splines, moving it up into the air. I might have made too many. Let's go a little bit easier, at least for my first attempt. So yeah, we'll go easy. We can definitely do more than that, but we'll start out simple. Okay, selecting the text, I want to control the subdivisions. So I will say I want a subdivided spline. I don't want to worry about the angle, but let's say every 5 units, it's going to create a new subdivision in between. And then on the cloner, apply the simulation rope tag. Oop, that's a rope belt. Simulation rope. And that should be all we need to do. These are now ready to fall with gravity and collide with other objects. These are both now static objects. So let's just try hitting play and see what happens. Okay, yeah, we definitely see it fall, and those ropes have connected. Well, the ropes have fallen, and anything that kind of hit the model is sticking to it because of the heavy friction. And it's running very quickly. So we know that these all have a distance of 5. So I'm pretty sure we can increase the radius to at least 2.5. And then let's sweep the whole thing so we can see it. We might need to put that into a connector. I'll try going directly into a sweep. Inside, set that to a radius of 2.5. I like rounding it up to 12. And yeah, it only swept the first one. But typically, we could feed that into a connect. And now it's going to merge them all into one object. Let's see if that still runs. Hit play. And yep, still running just fine. So working really well with the connector. And we've got all of our noodles with thickness now, so they should be passing through each other a lot less. Actually, I think that we do want that radius to be up to 5. Hit play, and boop, yeah, now they pop, and they are intersecting much less. Excellent. So let's create more of them. Let's jump this up to 3 by 3 by 3, which is significantly more. And as soon as I hit play, there's probably going to be a bit of a pop. Well, actually, no, not too bad. I thought they'd be intersecting more, but they weren't. So now, because we have all these different splines that should be occupying a very similar space, I would like them to start making connections. And you know what? I want even more. So let's be dangerous and go 5 by 5 by 5. Significant increase. Something I do is, one of the biggest things to slow you down in this situation is the sweep. The caps can be pretty slow, so I'm going to turn off the caps. Not too important for this situation. And I'm ready to hit pause really quickly. I expect it to take a little bit of time. Okay, it is running. Okay, yeah, it's running fine. Not going to be the fastest FPS, but it is running. So now we'll get that entire pile falling onto the character. Let's rewind that and hit NA to get rid of the polygons. And I would like to connect these. Right-clicking on the cloner, let's also add on a connector tag. So I'm going to say, well, it's not going to connect to the same object, so it's going to look at other objects. It's going to do a maximum number of connections of up to 3. And let's increase the radius a bit. 5 is not that huge. Temporarily, I'll turn off that sweep again, because when I hit create, we should, with any luck, see a series of, I'm not seeing any, other objects create. Maybe the connect is hiding them? Or is the radius just not large enough? I have to imagine some would exist there. Always draw. Any idea why I might have just done wrong, Rick? You can increase the search radius.
You may want to increase the max connections too. And I can't see the actual structure of your object manager. Skype's putting my own video on top of it.
Oh.
Now that doesn't help. It's Skype doing it.
Okay.
It won't let me move it on my machine. So I don't know. You may need same object if you're using the cloner. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, maybe. We'll just give that a try and clear.
Yeah, Fritz just said it's the same object.
Oh, there we go. Holy cow. Okay. So let's clear that out and try again with only 5. There's still quite a few connections. So I think we don't have to be too liberal with that number. There we go. You now see we got a nice amount of yellow interweaving lines. So so the cloner does treat it as one object. That was something I was guessing. Let me move you into the proper spot. My monitor is blinking on and off so much that I can't trust at what point. I don't know where the best place to put this is. I don't want to hide the object manager. Okay, I'll just make it a little bit bigger. Okie dokie. So we've got a bunch of connections going there now. Let's see what happens now. So lots of connections. Hit play, and these should be falling. And some will be loose because they won't have been close enough to something else to collide. But oh man, look at the mass just falling on top of the character. Reactivate the sweeps. And yeah, making those connections really quickly. Yeah, all of those interconnected. There's so much fun that is going to be had here. I can't wait to do more live streams where we get to answer questions just using some of these new tools. It's like we just clothed them up. But anyway, as Rick was saying, a couple of the Rocket Lasso tools have been working really well in conjunction with this. And here's a good example where we have this figure. Actually, let's try a different version. I would like to, let's fill this figure with a ricochet. So again, this is a plugin. This is a plugin that Rocket Lasso develops. I'll move ricochet so that it's inside the character, and I'll say, okay, I would like you to view the character. So now it's seeing it. And if I hide the character, you're going to see that there's a line bouncing around inside of it. So I'll say I want you to follow the surface a bunch, make the line way longer, and you can see I filled up the character a bunch with all these different lines. So with that line generated, I want the body to not be a collider right now, and I want the spline to again be a rope, and the rope can be bendy's fine. Let's have it be.
This might be a fun
5.
place to play with the curly option too.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, we'll leave this all default, and we're still in the default settings here as far as simulation is concerned as well. So without making any other changes, actually inside of Ricochet, we can go into the spline and subdivide it in a linear, uniform way, and just do a single subdivision. So, you know, there'll be some subdivisions in there that should be kind of even looking. Hitting play, you can see immediately the character pop and all the different lines fall, but it's still maintaining that volume pretty well, and it's so tangled up that they can't escape each other. So right out of the box there, that's working great. We can turn on this curly setting, as Rick mentioned, and curly, the way I've been keeping it in my head is imagine like a spring shape overall. Like in real life, you have a coil of wire, it's a spring, and you'd want that overall spring to maintain its overall shape. So that's what curly is going to help you do. Instead of it just being like a wet noodle, it's trying to maintain its overall combined points. So hitting play, well, it's still going to fall quite a bit, but you can see where you can see the arms. What setting is going to be best for this? Well, I'm not even sure, but you can see that the arm still feels like it's kind of distinctly linked in with itself. Let's get rid of a bunch of the bendiness. And then I wish there was some sort of stiffness setting, but the best way I found to add any sort of stiffness at all is to increase your substeps. So if I double our substeps, we should see this also be significantly stiffer overall. And and you see immediately how the body's like trying to maintain that shape a little bit more. It looks a little bit tragic. And what's cool here is just because of the tangles of the wires, it's maintaining the shape. We didn't make any connections here. They're just really tangled up with each other. So that's pretty neat. And then we can, let's see, what do I want to do? Let's drop that back down again because I don't think we need it. And we can make it very bendy, so the whole thing should fall over. And a bunch of friction. I think we can do some stretch and hit play. And something we haven't talked about in any of the little demos we've been doing so far is, and let's make that more visible by throwing it into a sweep. Something we haven't talked about, 2.5. Is that the correct amount? Bloop.
You may want to increase the radius. I don't know what your radius is for your...
Yeah, I think the radius is 5, but if my points are subdivided beyond that, it's not going to work. So I'll shrink the lines a bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. So what was I going to say? Oh, we can also tear splines. So if I turn on this tearing, and I'm not sure, I don't think it'll do too much tearing in the beginning, but let's hit play and see if we get anything. Because, okay, yeah, it did, because they're all intersecting each other. Some of them got flung apart, and now the spline itself has torn, and we get different sections of spline breaking apart. So as that collapses, we might get a few more tears. So very nice there. Let's try, is there any kind of, I guess we can just keyframe something. I haven't done this before, but if we just keyframe kind of like a cannonball here and set that to a collider, that should work, right? If we do the proper number of subdivisions. So at the time of 0, I don't want to go too many frames. Let's just go like 10 over. We'll have this have flown through relatively quickly. Tell that sphere to also be a simulation collider. Hit play. And now it, okay, yeah, it punched, oh, look at that. Look at that perfect hole that it punched out in the middle where those were still decently coherent. Let's increase the tear length so it's less likely to tear. Go a full 200. See if that's still enough for that to punch through. And yeah, look at these, like the different segments are actually holding together remarkably well. Okay, that worked almost exactly the way I wanted it to. Blam! Yeah, combining splines, obviously a really cool combination. And I'm just curious how this will look. And we've just been working in this one giant scene file, so I'll continue working in here. I want to show a mesh to spline as well, but let's do a different, well, I'll do a sphere this time. See if that works. I want to set that to be an icosahedron, NB, move it, scale it, get a couple more segments in there. Let's do, I don't know, 24. Let's go higher, 36. Okay, so there's a sphere, parametric, looking nice and clean. Another tool of ours over here at Rocket Lasso is mesh to spline. So hitting extensions, mesh to spline, drop that inside. It is now going to consume that spline and output it's going to consume that geometry and output a spline. I'm going to explode all the segments, and every single one of these is a separate piece now, meaning if I right click and add a simulation rope and then hit play, each of those are going to just explode apart from each other. So you can see how each one's its own little segment. So with each one being its own little segment, I can say, hey, I want you to be connected. So simulation, connector, and look at the same object, create, and they're all on top of each other, so we won't see the line, but I'm going to make the assumption that those have connected. So just hitting one frame forward, you can immediately see that, yes, indeed, they were connected. Let's make that visible again by feeding that through a sweep again, and another end side, down to 2. It looks like we might be gaining some energy in this particular one. Ooh, and this is a good situation that we should turn off caps, because there are a lot of caps in there. Excellent. So why would these, there's a plane on the ground, I hit play, and they're all kind of getting pulled into each other. Do you have any intuition for why they're interacting that way? Is it my assumption here is that the radius has a certain amount of distance. The connectors are saying, hey, you have to be close, but then the radius is saying, but you have to push apart because you're intersecting each other. And thus energy is being introduced into the system.
I'm not sure. That sounds reasonable.
I don't, I have years of experience doing the old bullet dynamics, but as far as doing these, I'm not fully there yet. So maybe this setup isn't cooperating quite as well as the last one, because these lines are intersecting probably at these triangles. When I did it with quads, it cooperated a lot more. I'll put it back to standard, because then we'll have more quads. I just want to see if that, I have to redo the connections. Every time you change your geometry, you have to clear your connections and remake them, because they're still trying to connect to their previous indexes. And it's gone. Bad combination there. I guess I'll be figuring out better demos to show that off in the future. But I think that they are intersecting each other and taking off into space. Let me think. I mean, there's so many different combinations. I'm trying, just a fun demo? If my monitor wasn't blinking on and off constantly, I'd be trying to read some of the chat and see if anybody had something specific they wanted me to try and demo.
There's a question about the update live checkbox, and what that basically does is it makes it so you don't need to manually click the create as you're adjusting the settings, like the search radius and the max connections, so that you can kind of see those happen as you're adjusting those settings.
Let me think.
You may want to turn on always draw too, Chris. That might show the connections better.
Yeah. Well, it's not going to work here because they're going to explode away from each other.
Yeah.
When I did this, I don't want to just do the same demo I did in my other video. But if we put that into a cube, I had it worked right out of the gate. So in the cube, clear, update, and now we should have a bunch of connections there. Hit play. That's still exploding. I can't help but feel I'm doing something wrong here, because that just was working out of the box. So. Actually, something that I have had happen a little bit, and I'm going to throw into GPU that's going to process. You see right there, I switched to GPU, and suddenly it's oh, it's working fine. So I feel like it somehow got some bad information from one of my previous simulations in, and I've been told that if you switch from one mode to the other and you hit play, let it play for a few frames, it's completely cleared out any information that could have been possibly in there. So now that I've done that and I hit play, now we're back to CPU and it's working fine. So I think those maybe weren't intersecting. There's just some leftover information somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, so having said that, now it's working. I should be able to switch this back to pretty much. Let me pause the audio. We've been going for more than 2 hours for me and Rick talking. Switch the material so I can see a different color on here. And yeah, we get this cage, but now the idea of being able to just have all these individual connections and run and break them as different simulations, that's where this stuff starts getting really intriguing to me. We can drop that onto the ground and get this entire cage going. One thing, I wonder if we can subdivide it immediately. This is a good job for utility splines, but those aren't out. But if I say Bezier linear, we'll say spline type linear and do a uniform distribution of 1, I think that'll create one subdivision between everything. Always draw is a good idea because it does show me that I broke that. Clear, recreate, hit play, and didn't like something there, but you can see the connections going. Clear, clear,
Yeah,
clear.
you may want to switch out a GPU and into CPU again.
Yeah, I'm curious if that is a thing, and that could again be a problem with my personal GPU setup.
Or it may be the way that it's relating with the plugin too. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the subdivisions here, that seemed to, like, it didn't like that. But I have done it with utility spines. I don't want to bring another plugin here yet, especially one that I haven't quite released. Man, I've got so many big demo ideas here, but like during a live stream, it's not the time to practice them. But actually, let me do a very simple demo that, well, I guess you kind of showed one already, but the stacking of paper is like really simple and trivial now, where I'll make this one a floor, copy and paste, make a bunch of clones, and have these just stack up on top of each other. Grid, linear, stack them up. Let's give them some random spin just as a starting point. We need to see some differentiation, so let's turn on at least some SSAO. And I suppose we could put on a random effector, which will also affect the color. There, so that should stack them a little bit nicer. Make a floor down here. Okay, make the floor into a simulation collider. Why is a collider a coat hanger?
Because that's what the cloth collides with.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
I mean, if you've got a shirt on a hanger, the hanger is the collider.
Okay, keep that simple. Hit play. Oh, I didn't switch off the GPU, so on my machine, it's not very friendly to that, as I mentioned. Hit play, it'll immediately start running, and now we get a lovely, simple stack of paper. So of course we can start adding on variation onto that. Let's make a more complex collider. So just a sphere on the base, have that be a collider as well. Hit play. So now all of those stack up on top of each other. But then we can do things like, hey, cloner, cloth, I want you to have some thickness. It does already, but let's make it more. I'll say like 5. And then that cloner will be fed into a, actually it's in this menu now, a cloth surface, and we'll say that should be having a thickness, not subdivisions, it should be having a thickness of 5 as well. So you can see those now actually have thickness. We lose the color, but now when I hit play, then hopefully, yeah, you see these stacking up, and that thickness is automatically enabled those to offset based on that thickness. Like very, very seamless way of doing that. Ah, so cool. And
looks
these
like
are all
cheese slices now.
Yeah, these are all terrible. Or they're not terrible. They are tearable. So we can, I'm gonna copy the sphere and move it up a bit. I want a small one and move this up, and let's see if we can make these tear as they pass through this. So that's already a collider. I want to say cloth, you can tear, and I'm not even gonna change it off the default. We'll see what that does. So that's gonna hit, and is it punching a hole through? Hard to tell. They might be surviving that. Actually, they did survive it, so let's make them more bendy, a little bit stretchy, and have them tear any direction they want to and be easier to tear. Hit play, and let's see. Nope, they are super behaving themselves. Okay.
It may be because of the thickness, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe. I'm gonna make them really easy to tear. Let's see if that works. Okay. Yeah. Well, now they're just exploding. Wow, that looks pretty cool, actually. Okay, so somewhere between 150 and 101 is going to be some sort of sweet spot here. Come on. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
A very mechanical-looking tear. I'm trying to think of what material that even feels like, given the how thick it is and the way it's...
One little trick, too, when you're doing simulations on plane-type things like this, is cloth simulates really well with Delaunay subdivision. So what I'll often do is, instead of using a plane, I'll actually use a rectangle in a loft, and the caps have Delaunay subdivision. So
oh, I see.
Actually,
what I was about to say is we can grab a poke polygon and drop that into the plane, and that's going to give us this kind of different layout of polygons. And let's just take a look at how different that is. I turned off the cloth surface so we can see the colors. And let's see, that is now punching through. And yeah, instead of those blocky shapes, you can see we get some nicer looking tears. The cloth, let's say, I'm going to put the tearing guide down to 0 and see what that does in this instance. I'm still trying to get some intuition on exactly how that works. And yep, okay, so a way nicer tear kind of along a seam in this instance. But then you can always push these things further where you get this really kind of neat pattern on that. Let's decrease the overall count on those so we still have the poke polygons, and then feed that into a subdivision surface and drop that to 1 by 1. And now look at this super crazy pattern that we have on there. So the ability to make some, different layouts, different patterns. I have a whole tutorial about that, but things like poke polygons have opened up even more opportunities to get some crazy looking shapes. So yeah, that's unfolding really nicely, actually. Look at the nice kind of, the folds. We have good detail in the folds with this particular mesh layout. So exploring even that type of thing can go a long way. Let's make it have not quite so much thickness. That might be affecting the tearing. I am curious. We have to find out how these settings interact with each other. Yeah, the rounding went a long way, and now, those were able to tear through a bit as a big giant pile. So yeah, man, so much fun to be had. And I am super duper looking forward to finding like all the crazy applications. Like we were still figuring out new things to do with soft body collisions, like 2 weeks ago. So we've got years and years and years of exploration here, and this is just the first pass of seeing some of this new simulation stuff. So a very exciting dynamic future is awaiting us.
And there was that question in chat about whether this is the start of more for dynamics, and I think you can kind of draw that conclusion by the way that we've sort of reorganized the menus to create a simulation menu where we can put more simulation.
There's lots of space here.
All be based on the same new system that we're building.
Look how much room there is. This can fly out, and then you can go all the way down. And then for anybody who's wondering, like here's all the new simulation stuff, and the older simulations are the bullet tags up here. So there's your rigid body and your soft body. Yeah. I feel like it's really dangerous to do. I'm trying to think of the way I'd want to do it. I kind of want to try and throw some clothing on a character. Do you have? I am not very familiar with belting. Even back with cloth, I was never too fond of the way the clothing worked, so I never did too much of it. But I kind of want to very dangerously.
Yeah, it's not really something I'm comfortable doing live, other than to open the 1 or 2 demo files that people.
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna risk it though. Okay, there's the motion capture. Let's do some.
There was a question while you're looking for that about the proper nomenclature terminology for the poke polygons that Chris dragged into the object manager. We call those geometry modifier capsules. So they're using the new scene nodes core, and you can drag them in and have them act as geometry modifiers, sort of like a deformer, but it's doing sort of modeling operations.
I'm a big fan of this falling animation, and I think it'll be good about it won't be pinching itself anywhere, so I think it's a good place to start. So if I select this mocap, I can click on go to reference pose, and he's going to jump back to the original T pose. Typically what I do, and I know we just did this a minute ago, but I'll make a figure, and we will make the figure editable. Actually, I'll throw it into a connect to make that editable, so it's very easy to view this from the front. Go to point mode, select via a rectangle through the entire thing, and I'm just going to stretch his torso up until the arms are kind of matching right there. And then feed that into the volume builder, volume mesher. I almost feel like there should be a shortcut now that will just feed a model into a builder, into a mesher, into a remesh. It's just going to be like, that's the workflow. Drop that down to 3. Again, inflate a bit just to get, we don't want it intersecting, but that should work fine. And then we're in the remesh. Drop that down to, let's say, 10%. I'm going to leave it extra low poly because we're in a live stream, and we want things not to pinch too much. Okay, that's very, very low poly, but that could be to our advantage right now. I will make it editable so we can rig it. And yeah, it's not perfectly matching, but let's just roll with it. So this should be pretty straightforward. Having the let's middle mouse click on the hips, and that will select every single joint in the entire hierarchy. Select the body, go to character, bind, and just click bind. That should have bound it. Everything should be set. So now if I rewind, then you see the new model I made is going to jump into the position, and we now have an animated model that's actually able to move around. Now we need to make, oh, when did it stop looping? Wasn't it looping before?
I don't think it will loop by default.
I thought it was. That's weird. Okay, I want that to loop. What's the quickest way of getting it to loop?
Just go into the timeline and select all the tracks and
yeah. Right click, and then we go to
over there
after repeat, or let's just say repeat.
Yeah.
And I think repetitions 0 is infinite, right?
Infinite, yeah.
Okay, let's see if that works. Yay. Okay, nice and simple. Okay, now reset back to the reference pose. This will become a collider, so simulation collider. And now we need to make some sort of clothing for it. I'm trying to think of what's the best way to go about doing this. I mean, the simplest thing will be like throwing a skirt on there. So that should be an easy one to conceive of. Let's make an end side, lay it flat on the ground, jump it to maybe 24 segments. That seems about what the character is. Pull that down and make a duplicate. Create a loft, and combine those two. And the second loft will be pulled way down. T for scale, make it way larger. Then the loft, we will say more subdivisions, no caps, and more segments around. That seems about right. Now, as far as belting something like this, do you have any idea how to do it, or am I going to be making up as I go completely?
You might even try, I mean, because if you belt, you're going to have to make all that editable, but you may even be able to just use the new connector workflow.
Yeah, that's true. Let's live dangerously. I'm going to shrink that way in, so it's pretty close. I'm going to approximately line it up near some polygons. I mean, it's the points that are going to connect to each other, right? It's not worried about surfaces or anything.
Right.
Okay, so let's, that is still, I guess I can't tell if it's looping or not. It is set to repeat 0. Let's attempt to bake that again. This is not a function I've ever used before either. So don't create a copy. Bake the entire timeline. Go. And that instantly worked, so that's fine. So yeah, I wonder if that was just colliding with the those collisions. So now what I was going to do is, now that we have done that, I think we should be able to scoot. Oop, let me select all children. Oh, did it bake all the children? I'm going to bake it again just to be safe. Boop. Okay, well, that should definitely be baked. Now, select all the children. All the keyframes are selected. Let's give ourselves 30 frames. Where nothing is really happening. And with any luck, there's nothing happening there. So here's my thought. We reset the character to the reference pose, select all the children, and probably even the parent, coordinates, keyframe, and keyframe, the position and rotation. So now we should have, with any luck, a 30 frame transition there. So now it actually can go from the skirt animation, or from the character getting the skirt applied, moving into the final position. Awesome. So let's rebelt it. I'm going to not make the geometry crazy yet. Let's just see if the principle works, and then we can worry about making it fancier if need be. So we do need to make it editable. We don't need the tags. Let's again right click and simulation cloth, add the collider onto the remesh, add a belt onto the skirt, save, and I want to belt onto that model these points, UL for loop, and set. Clear, set.
Do you have the collider on the right object? Yeah.
Oh wait, that's a rope belt. My bad. We need a cloth belt. That's a whole different thing. Drop that in. We've got that same point selection. belt, set. There we go. Now we got our lines. Okay, so save, object mode, and let's go 1 frame forward. Always, whenever I do any kind of simulation, I always go 1 frame forward. Let's make sure I also have my simulation set to CPU. That could have also been causing us trouble before because we already know my GPU is not currently happy, especially while streaming.
Did you save?
I'll save again after the CPU. Okay, now I'm going to go 1 frame forward, and immediately we're getting like, okay, that's running completely fine. So now I feel confident to play. Oh, wow, okay, that worked really well, almost instantly. With this belt, the way it is there a way of like pulling it close to the model?
I think the dresser
is that what dresser does?
You would do that.
Okay, dresser, dress mode.
So just hit. I think you actually hit Dress-O-Matic, if I remember correctly. It's been a while since I played with the dresser. Maybe just hit relax.
Yeah, I think that's just like having some time calculate. Initial state, dress state, clear, show, fixed points, seam, polygons. Yeah, I'm not. This is not certainly not my area of expertise. How do we pull that in tight? Maybe somebody in the chat has done this before. Yeah, if anybody knows how the classic cloth baking
belt has a setting.
Belt has a setting. I mean, there's influence and hover. So I'll say 0% hover. And carefully. Oh, okay, that is indeed what it is. So that is flinging it in full power, which is potentially a dangerous thing. Let's do 10%. So that's going to pull it in quite a bit. Yeah, there's a lot of energy, like trying to yank them in really close. So yeah, I'm not sure how far we go. Let's go 50, kind of step our way through. Okay, yeah, didn't quite go all the way. 25. Okay, yeah, 25 is getting it pretty tight on there, so we'll do 15. Boop. Still a lot of energy from those colliding from a really tight belt. I'm trying to think of what I might do. But anyway, let's play with some settings. It's in dress mode. That might not be helping. So under our regular cloth, let's give it a bunch of bendiness. Let's give it some stretch.
Whoa.
And it's a kilt.
We need some wind.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, yeah, that's a good point. Let's add some wind in here. So simulate forces. All of these forces are going to work with the new simulation except for field force, and I'm definitely looking forward to that addition. Let's create the wind. Where is it? Did I misclick? Forces, wind, and the wind is currently blowing the opposite direction, so we'll spin that around. I think I found that this wind is a lot weaker on these objects, so that should be applying right away. And you can see I don't think it has much influence, but right now it's only set down to 5. But typically 40 would be gravity, but I don't think that is gravity. I found that having to do like 400 made it feel a little bit more even. Okay, well that's definitely doing something because it's staying in that direction. Okay, cool. Okay, actually, you know, once we actually had the character properly set up, that was not very difficult. I would kind of like to do, and it's running so quickly, I would like to do the fancier version. So something I'm actually kind of thinking would be neat would be, can we remesh this to get a very even mesh? I haven't tried it with an open form before. But you see, our polygons shrink as they go. And it's always better if everything's really even. So I'm just curious if we can throw that into the remesh. And, well, right now it's keeping it really clean. I'm going to say don't be adaptive. No, I guess the polygons are so clear of what they want to be that there might not be a way of that transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, it's just a thought. Because, yeah, that's a very simple mesh we're throwing in there. Okay. Anyway, I think we have the polygons to spare, so I'll only decrease that a little bit and decrease that until they're approximately square. The top one, let's shrink that to match the character a little bit closer in the beginning. That seems fine. Then I'll do my trick again of poke polygons. You know what? I was going to say I think in my video I talked about how like poke is neat, but I don't know when I'm going to use it. I think I might end up eating those words because how many times have I reached for it already in this demo? And then that will be fed into a connect. I'll duplicate the entire thing, make that one editable so we can actually work from it. I don't want to copy over the belt. I don't want to bring any baggage along with it. So we'll turn off all the original and run the belt process completely from scratch. Simulation, cloth belt. Cloth belt will be looking at the remesh, setting the top points. And you know what? It might be a good idea to grab every other point. That way you can kind of pleat.
Mm-hmm.
That's the right word, right? Pleat.
Yeah.
So they'll just take a second. Is there a quick way of selecting every other one?
No.
I didn't think so. Okay, cool. Every other point selected. So now those can actually pinch on top of each other. So let's do the same process again, where we are going to set those instantly connected. And we want the hover to be 15% is what worked last time. Save it just in case. And yep, it's got the same tag. So we got the bendiness, some stretchiness. No, not much friction. I'm gonna lower the friction actually almost down to 0. So it can be more freely slide. And let's do 1 frame forward. Okay, cool, seems fine. And let that fall over. And already we're getting way nicer bending here where like the definition is looking better. Yeah, better wrinkles. Let's change the color so that we can actually see it while we're running. Custom bright pink. Actually, no, I said it was a kilt. Let's make it green. Okay, I'll hide the wind because we don't need to see that flapping. And I'll set it to my preset, which is going to hide like all the extra stuff in the viewport. I like it nice and blank. Hits play. And the wind is blowing, but it doesn't seem to be having too much of an effect on that. If I don't put limit to, it should be affecting everything, right?
Yes.
So let's see.
It just may not be catching
Yeah.
the surface.
My inclination is always to crank it up to like some crazy number, but that's potentially dangerous. But I'm going to... Okay, yeah, I jumped up and you can obviously see it's having an effect right now. So I think it just wasn't quite strong enough. And the friction was probably holding it on better before. So now it's twice as strong. And we'll see if that's doing... Yeah, that's definitely doing a better job now. And yeah, actually, that's working really well. I mean, essentially, clothing was not something we could ever really do in cinema in the past. It was very limited what you could pull off. Maybe like a cape would work. But if you went beyond it, you could run into limitations. But that's not too bad there. Especially with us just kind of guessing. Neither of us knew how to do clothing. Now, I would like to probably put that into a connect because I don't need that to weld. But because I put in a connect, I can now throw a smoothing onto it. And that should smooth out some of those. Yeah, we don't want to go too far in it because, yeah, that might make it pass through the leg. So let's only do like maybe even 1 layer of smoothing. And then that can be fed into a cloth surface. Give it no subdivisions, but give it some thickness. You know what actually might be even better there?
Go ahead.
The
smoothing doesn't really, because of where the cloth is, I'm not sure if the smoothing will really apply because of where the cloth activates.
I think it does. Yeah, you see, like as I drag, like we definitely get a visual change. But I was going to say maybe I should throw that into a single subdivision surface. We'll just do 1, and then I'll have that smooth. So now the subdivision surface will get smooth only by 1. We can do like 2 if we wanted to. The cloth surface will now give it some thickness, so we can push that back out again. And yeah, that's sort of something. Let's see what we get. Hit play. So a bunch of that processing is happening after the fact. So the simulation should be running relatively smooth. And I mean, based on the polygons I gave it, those are still looking a bit chunky. Based on my particular algorithm for like doing the poke polygons and whatnot, might not be the best subdivision. Like obviously those won't smooth out as well. Oop, and we just get the green going again. Yeah. Turn off the smooth. Yeah, it needs a little more thickness. Or we should tell this to have the cloth to have a little bit more thickness out of the gate. And we could even potentially tell the model to be thicker. But yeah, even just that base one did. I'll have to figure out the belt at the beginning, because if we don't have enough stretchiness or bendiness, it's possible that those just won't work. So I have some more exploration to do. And keep in mind that we haven't even changed any settings yet. So these are all still default. So we could like more than double that. We could do 2 iterations. I could do an extra collision pass. We can get some polish passes going. I imagine it's going to start running significantly slower, but didn't really help much. I mean, it might be one of those situations where more accuracy actually hurts it, because it's trying really hard to pull them into a particular spot.
Right.
So doing some sort of softer connection there would probably be a good way of doing it. Probably even better would be to properly model something. So when it's belted directly onto where the seams are.
Yep.
A lot of places to improve, but just very quickly throwing a skirt on here, that is working pretty well. Way better than the old cloth would ever have worked for me. So yeah, I continue to be excited for some details here. Okay, we're going to be wrapping up. Is there any last questions over here on Twitch of anything else we can do while we have Rick? Your last chance to hit Rick with a question while all the S26 stuff is super fresh. Let me check if anything popped in. Balloon dude, yep. What's my CPU? My CPU, let me pull open these. And I've got my computer specs here somewhere.
Fritz said to reduce the belt influence. I guess back where your belt was going crazy. I don't know if you want to go back to it or not.
Yeah. Well, why not? I'll flip the screen while people are asking final questions. So we'll try dropping that to 50. Hit play. Well, yeah. Well, okay. So that those are now looser there, and yeah. Okay, that goes a long way. There's Fritz with the magic answer right away. So
as usual.
Even 100%, like 100% is probably causing the trouble. Yeah, even dropping it to 90, you can see that there's a softer connection there now. So the polygons were trying to maintain a certain distance, and then they were being forced via the belt back into a particular spot. And now by relaxing that just a little bit, suddenly it's working instantly way better. So very cool.
There is, there's some discussion too in the YouTube chat, which did come back to life, that about, I guess in the Japanese video, there's a nice, there was a demo video that was put out by Maxon Japan that I guess has some nice plastic deformation demo scenes. I haven't had a chance to watch that video yet, so I can't really comment on it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, do you have to? Do you have a hard out here, Rick?
Not a hard out, but it's fading.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, I'm trying to think of a demo I had really enjoyed doing, and I wonder how it'll work with the new system. If we search for a car, and let's do the van. The van's fun. So there's going to be a lot of subdivisions here. So let's search for object types, find the subdivision surface.
You're not sharing right now.
I should probably share. Thank you, Rick. Okay, I just brought the van in from the assets browser, and now filter. I want to find every instance of the subdivision surface. So I should be able to do that, right? Subdivision surface. Oh, okay, that is working. I just have to turn off the filter. Okay, those are all selected now. And I'm going to say, just turn them all off. I don't want any subdivision surfaces, so we can get a relatively low poly count. The wheels are still kind of crazy. But now let's make a copy paste of the van, feed that one into the volume builder, volume mesher. Oh, the splines are coming through. Let's delete the rig. That makes sense. Okay, now we've got a volume version of the van. Oh yeah, and some of those wheels are instances, so you always have to deal with that. Turn these off and find the instance here. Yeah, you'll see that these are instances, so I will make those editable, and hopefully you can see it properly now. Okay, cool. So now we get this perfect blobby version of the van. I might even inflate it just a bit. So object, dilate in the road. Just do 1. So that should be encapsulating the car overall. There might be a hole down there, but those also might be proper holes anyway. Why not throw this into the ReMesher? Remesh, And oh, look at that, so nice. Don't be adaptive because we're going to be running soft bodies on here. Okay, so if that is indeed our final model, and I don't even think if we're not belting, I don't think we have to make it editable. So how would I? So here's my question. Rick, in the bullet dynamics, we could make like a rigid body and then set some sort of custom initial velocity. Obviously, that parameter doesn't exist in the new one. But if I wanted to make this entire thing soft body and then propel it forward, what's jumping to mind? I guess we'd just drop it, but I kind of wanted to accelerate it like into a pole. Because we can apply a force, but there's nothing like an initial velocity. Well, we'll just drop it for now, and I'll think about other possibilities for that in the future.
Yeah, all I can think of is a force object.
Yeah. Okay, so that'll be the van. Let's make the ground a collider. And that should be fine for now. Gravity should take over and that should fall. So let's take a look at, let's make a cylinder. Put it on X, make it taller. And I'm gonna stick this right over here so that can also be collided with. And let's give it a quick save. Into episode 4 scene files. Car smash. Okay, now I'm gonna 1 frame forward just to make sure everything's working. Oh yeah, it's a little sluggish starting there, but yeah, that's fine. So you see it's dropping, it hits that shape, it drops, kind of blobs down. So, so nice blob there. If we want to maintain the shape a bit, we'd want like as little bendiness as possible, as little stretch as possible. And then I guess we could tell it to maintain its pressure. And then we need to increase our subframes, and that essentially will increase the stiffness. The stiffness as a separate setting would be something I'd love. But let's see what that does by itself. Still running reasonably well. So that's going to hit the back and then fall over. The top's deforming in. Yeah, maintain the overall structure. I'm trying to think of how to do that. We could decrease the poly count. That would help. But anyway, okay, so that's falling over. You know what? Just to make sure everything bakes in properly, I always love putting things into a connect object. Make that editable. I don't want to lose that tag, so I'll temporarily put it over here. Make this editable. Bunch of nulls inside there. Put the tag back over. Control D. Also simulation. I again forgot to set mine to CPU. And I'll save that as another version just in case. Boop. Okay, so I'm gonna hit play to make sure that that is indeed still working. Yeah, okay, and the GPU is what was making that go so slow. Okay, so stiffen that up.
Which normally should not be the case. There's something weird on Chris's system.
Yeah, definitely. It's my computer doing it. So I'll crank those substeps up, and now you can see it's way stiffer. Okay, that's more what I was aiming for. Okay, now let's see if indeed we can put a... I guess we do have... There's a lot of models in there. Just to be super safe, I'm not sure what was causing the problem. I will make a connect object, turn off weld, and drop the car in there. Make that editable. So now it's just a piece of geometry. Meaning we've given it the best possible opportunity to get a mesh deformer. That mesh deformer will reference the low poly version that we made. Advanced, let's do surface, initialize. Okay, instantly initialize. I'll have to figure out exactly what it didn't like about that previous one. So now we've got the, well, I didn't make the wheels editable, so they disappeared. NA, and let's hit play and see what we get. Smush and smash. So this is still just kind of a big wiggly
kind of love how we can see the shock down there, though.
Yeah, the way they're traveling through is looking really good. So now that we have that set up, I'll pull back on our steps per frame so we can see it a little bit faster. And now we go into our cloth, twirl down plastic deformation, and I would like this to deform. And for now, it's a good idea if you're going to do a bend deform, also do a stretch deform. And I'm going to say it pretty much, if it breaks at all, stay broken. So only 2%. And if it deforms past 101%, so pretty much any amount, then 100%. Remember how you broke. Hitting play, that should now fall, smash against a pillar, and you see that's now smashed, and it's keeping that shape. That's going to smash, and it's keeping the shape, and it's continuing to collapse down. So you should definitely, we need to make this of sterner stuff. But yeah, so we can see that the cloth, the concepts with soft body are also moving very well into this new form of cloth tag. From a programming point of view, Rick, is the actual dynamic simulation going on behind the scenes? Is there any relationship between the old cloth and the new?
No, not unless you switch to the legacy mode, which you can still do if for some reason you want the old cloth. In the basic tab, there's a legacy option, which pulls the old spline dynamics and old cloth in.
Yeah, I guess to make old scene files continue to work.
Yeah, but otherwise it's all completely new cloth and rope dynamics.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? Scene nodes offer significant improvements in cloner areas. I think you're talking to somebody else. Yep.
Yeah, there's some side conversations going on here.
Oh, which is always great. But yeah. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but you never know what's going to happen. The monitor's been completely behaving ever since I restarted the computer, so go figure. I will be ordering a new one, so right after NAB, it'll be a new monitor, so I don't have to worry about this anymore. And I definitely got to talk to some people and figure out what's going on with my video card as far as the GPU calculations inside of Cinema. So, yep. Make sure you join the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. If you haven't already, I have like an hour and 40-minute long video all about all of the new features inside of S26. I think it seems like I only missed what are they called? Like variable fonts.
Yep.
I forgot to talk about those. But yeah, it should cover everything else. I will be hanging out with Maxon at NAB next week. I'll be doing 2 different presentations. One is going to be all about the new simulations, all the cloth and the rope stuff, and I'll have a whole bunch of cool new demos figured out by then. And the second presentation is probably going to be more of a Rocket Lasso Live, where I might take questions live and just tinker with some of the new features inside of Cinema. But I think that's going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming and hanging out with us. As always, it's always appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'll just mention, definitely come up and say hi if you're at NAB. And also, if you're not going to be at NAB, keep in mind that we are still streaming from the show every presentation on 3dmotionshow.com. So NAB starts Sunday this year. Beginning Sunday all the way through Wednesday. Check out all the great presentations from the Maxon booth.
Yeah, there's a great lineup this year, so I am super looking forward to it. But in any case, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you from the NAB show floor next week.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.